I thought my in-laws would welcome me. They seemed like they loved me and showed all this affection. But when one day I decide to tell them I am not giving up my baby for them, well, they started to hate me. And I'm going to tell you something else that is going to shock you to the core. It's a secret. Hey everyone. A friend of mine recommended I visit here to tell you guys my story. She assured me that most of the audience are amazing people who would understand me and guide me better. Before I begin, let me tell you a little about myself. I'm a woman who spent most of her life dreaming of things she could not have. Didn't have. I was very young when I lost my mother in an accident. It was me and my dad for about 7 years before he, too, succumbed to illness and lost his life. By then, I'd become an adult. I gave up the idea of going to college and started doing odd jobs to earn. If anything, my parents have taught me to never give up, and I didn't. That's why, unlike other fellow students, I passed university at the age of 27. I had enough work experience to land a job at a local high school where I worked for 7 years. By then, most of my friends were married and with children going to school. My colleague Samantha Wright told me about this blind date, and that's how I met the love of my life and future husband, Mark. I'm sure that many of you would be thinking that everything turned out well for me after all. Believe me, I thought the same, but it was the beginning of a series of challenges for me. I'd lived all my life alone in my parents' house, which is still under my name. That's why Mark suggested that I move in with his family. Something that was foreign to me for years, so I agreed without a second thought. Don't get me wrong, because I've never regretted it, at least not for half a decade. My mother-in-law, Martha, became truly my mom. She looked after me as she looked after her only daughter, Raina. My father-in-law, Will, is a paraplegic, but he was such a nice person to be around. He reminded me of my own dad and was also conscious of my well-being. Dylan, my husband's youngest brother, became a good friend of mine. I dared to introduce him to one of my oldest students. Everything was great at the beginning. I focused more on my health and my career because after marrying Mark, I wanted to have my own children. I was a teacher and I'd spent many years in the company of young students and dealt with their mischief, but that had not lessened my desire to have kids of my own. When I failed to conceive by the age of, 40, I sought other methods. Mark supported me and so did Martha, and everyone was on my side except fate itself. By the age of 42, I told Mark that I was exhausted because I truly was. I'd lost. I'd given up. After 40 years of struggling through life to achieve my goals, I was done. Mark consoled me and told me that it was not my fault. He suggested adopting a couple of children, and Martha gave us her approval. Still, I hesitated. I was battling anxiety and was not willing just because it would have affected the children I'd take as my own. I'd say that fate was done testing me by the time I reached 44. One day, I got up for work with a strange headache. I had an important meeting, so I swallowed a couple pills and got ready to face yet another day. But by lunchtime, I could not carry on. My colleagues told me to call it a day, but I simply refused. And that's how I fainted during one of my lectures and was taken into an emergency room. Samantha called Mark. He got there by the time the doctors were done doing their examination, and what they told me turned my world upside down. I was 3 weeks pregnant. I didn't believe them, nor did Mark. Together, we go and visit the city's best OBGYN, and he said the same. I was expecting triplets. Triplets? I got home, called my workplace, and said that I wanted urgent maternal leave till delivery. Mark called his workplace and requested a change in his working hours. Martha was overjoyed, and she assured me that she'd take care of me, and she did. Raina was happy for us too. She bought tons of gifts for her nephew and nieces, and Dylan set up the nursery for my children. Those 9 months were a dream, but I did not want them last because I wanted to hold my children in my own arms. Little Aiden was my first baby. I held in my arms, and he had his father's nose and lips while he inherited my eyes and hair color. Then I held my girls and my arms together, Mia, Alicia. Given my age and following health issues, it became twice as hard for me to take care of my babies, but I did not let my limitations stop me from taking care of my triplets. My health, it started to deteriorate, but I held on all my life, and all my struggles, I've had it for them. I couldn't give up. Not then, not now, never again. Things got worse a couple of weeks ago. The reason why I'm on here is seeking advice. After dinner on the previous weekend, Martha called me into her room. She began by apologizing to me, which had me confused and concerned. When she presented her absolute absurd request, I knew why she apologized first. Will and Martha want me to give one of my girls to Raina. I balked at the idea and left my parent-in-law's room without even saying a word. Back into my room, I cried for hours, till Mark came home with his head hung low. I didn't need to ask him, to know that his family had contacted him with the peculiar request too. Mark and I did not need to discuss the topic. We both knew how much we'd struggled to have a child, and just when we were given the fruits of our hard labor, his family wanted their share of the cut too. I'd never deny that they've been a huge support ever since I became a part of my family, but what hurts me is the fact that they want to cash it. A couple of nights ago at the dining table, Martha asked me about what we thought of her request. Of course, I told her that we disagreed, and Mark also pointed out that being a mother herself, she should not have asked another mother to give up her child. To this, Raina became enraged. Raina has always been a smart and hardworking woman. She's beautiful and poised and just hardly faced any tough circumstances except maybe a few unstable relationships. She's the one who's fed it to her mother that she won't have children because they will affect her career. Instead, she sought to raise one of her brother's girls as her own and fulfill her dream of being a mom. When Raina called me a selfish, egotistical, and inconsiderate woman, nobody dared to stop her. When she was done saying her piece, Martha took up her banner and started on my medical history. I'm not healthy. I know that, but to have a woman who's like your mother brandishing your medical record at the dining table is the most horrendous thing ever. She pointed out how I wasn't the right woman to raise her grandchildren, and how I could not give them the future that they need, the future that Raina could. That night I cried a lot, and my husband cried with me. He felt terrible and guilty because it'd been his family to hurt me. Broken when he mentioned giving up Mia to stop things from getting worse. The last of my control disappeared, and I shouted at him to leave me alone. Even though he apologized, I wasn't ready to hear any of it. He left, and it's been 3 days that he's spending all his time at work, and I'm trapped in my room, afraid that Martha or Raina will come and take my children away from me. So, let me ask you guys this. What do you suggest that I do? How can I stop my relationship with my in-laws from absolutely falling to pieces and not lose any of my children at the same time? Also, holding on to my children, knowing that I'm stopping them from having a golden future, it does make me a bad person, right? I'll be waiting on your responses. What is up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Today's story is such a wild roller coaster. Being in OP's position is not only unique, it's absurd. I would like to hear your response to OP's question at the end, so you can pause the video and drop a comment down now, or you can just wait to the end after these multiple updates. Guys, if you're new to the channel, just take a second and hit that subscribe button, as it does support me a lot and I appreciate that. And now it's time for update number 1. Hey everyone. It's been days since I last posted. Everything's been hectic and I rarely get the time to log in and share the updates with you. I've moved by the support of all you've shown me. Even though I couldn't reply to any, I still kept up the comments and I found some strength in your words. On the weekend when Mark came home, the two of us sat down and talked about everything. I told him, as many of you guided me, that his words hurt me deeply. I was already struggling to accept my in-laws turning away from me, and he'd been the only one I could rely on. He apologized and told me that he said the words because he was just tired of everything that's been happening with his family. Further, he discussed the problems he's been facing at work. Then it was my turn to feel guilty, because for the first time in my life, I could not see him struggling. The two of us talked the whole night while tending to our kids together, and we've decided the best decision would be to leave the Fraser family house. Yesterday morning during breakfast, Mark told his parents about our decision. Of course, it was not received very well, and there was quite some backlash. Martha told Mark that she was disappointed in him, for he had become uxorious. It was too much, coming from Martha's mouth herself. Mark's face had turned red and I could not take it anymore. I told Martha that she was a terrible mother who did not deserve to have a son like Mark. I'd been too angry, so I didn't read much into the mood, which is why Raina splashed cold water on my face. The gesture enraged Mark and he ended up slapping his sister. Thankfully, Dylan wasn't home or the situation would have escalated. When Martha began shouting at her children and accusing me of turning them against each other, I decided to leave. Mark and I packed up without exchanging a word, got into the car with 3 babies screaming for we disturbed their slumber. Raina took the chance and shouted at how I was an insult to mothers, as I did not know how to look after them. Our neighbors even gathered outside at the commotion, so Mark made haste to get the heck out of there. We spent last night at a hotel and Mark has taken today off from work. We've decided to move back into my parents' house, which I'd given up rent. The tenants are furious at us and are threatening us with lawsuits, but hey, we don't care. I don't have a job and we can't spend all of Mark's savings on hotel rooms. I believe that whatever will happen with the tenants is something that'll be far less horrible than what my in-laws have done to us. This problem is far from over, I know. Knowing my in-laws, they will not let us be. They'll keep coming after us and Mia because Raina has set her sights on my baby girl. If I've learned anything about Raina, it's that she gets what she wants. Martha dotes on her only daughter and would do anything for her, even if it means taking Mark's child right away from him. Okay, I need to go. There's so much to tell, but Aiden is squirming, and before long, he's going to be screaming for milk. And please, do keep advising me, because it was thanks to all you amazing people that my husband and I sorted the mess between us. I'll make sure to keep reading your comments and answer your questions as much as I can. Bye. Update number 2. Something terrible has happened and I'm losing it. Raina visited me and she left a couple hours ago with threats and a reminder that I'm fighting a losing battle. Aiden and Mia have caught some stomach bug and they've been keeping me up for most parts of the previous few nights. I don't know when was the last time I put on cream and did a bit of makeup. Even my hair resembles a bird's nest because I haven't had the time to comb it. But I don't mind. No, because my children are my first priority and their well-being is the only thing I really care about. Still, it seems that it's not enough. Today, when Mark left for the office, he seemed apologetic for not being able to help me with the kids much. I can't blame him, because his company is dealing with some legal issues. I believed him when he said that they'd been sorted out soon, but we might face some financial issues in the upcoming time. When he left, I fed my kids and tried to put them to sleep when Raina showed up at my doorstep out of nowhere. She looked breathtaking in her black shirt underneath the red coat, matching flare pants, and I was just insanely jealous of her till she opened her mouth. Without waiting for me to let her in, she just pushed past me and went straight for Mia, who had just thrown up her breakfast. Seeing her in that state, Raina was absolutely furious. She took my daughter's pictures and sent them to her mother as proof that I was not a deserving mom. Trust me, when I say that I don't let myself be bothered by whatever nonsense Raina says, but I won't deny the feeling that I'm certainly not doing my best for my children. With Mia crying in the background and Aiden screaming for formula milk, Raina started shouting at me. She began by calling me out on the hygiene around the house, and then how I was keeping the sick children at home when I should have been seeking medical assistance. I opened my mouth to tell her that I've already went to a child specialist and was giving the babies medicine he prescribed but decided against it. When someone has already made an opinion about you, there's nothing you can say that'll change it, really. As if saying everything to me wasn't enough, she dialed Martha's number and put her on speaker. My mother-in-law talked about the way she'd raise her children during the times when technology was limited. I listened to everything quietly while trying to soothe my wailing children. When Raina hung up the call, I told her that she was not the best mother material as well, because had she been, she would have assisted me instead of belittling me. Of course, my words made her mad and infuriated the proud finance manager. She told me that she'd be taking Mia one way or another, and she'd prove to the world that she was better suited to be the girl's mom than I was. Then she left, and I focused all my time and energy on putting my kids to sleep. Now that there is sleep and everything's finally quiet, I can still hear Raina's words echoing in my mind. Do you suppose it was wise for me to say something like that to infuriate the women? How can I stop such incidents from happening again? Is there a way for Raina to take my girl from me? If anybody knows, please drop it down so I'm prepared for the worst before it happens. Update number 3, 22 days later. I've lost my father-in-law, William, 2 weeks ago. Mark received his mother call during dinner who had been crying, and I told Mark to go to her and see that, she holds up, and assured him that I'd arrange for a babysitter and be beside him as soon as I can. We got the news of William's passing late at night, so it wasn't easy for me to find a trustworthy babysitter until the next day's afternoon. When I showed up at the funeral, I faced many despicable stares from the gathered family friends of the Frasers. It was evident that in their sorrow, Martha had said many things about me. I stayed beside Mark without sharing a word with anybody. I replied to those who came to offer me their condolences, and after the funeral, I did not stay long with my in-laws as I was worried about my children. Ever since they were born, I was not apart from them that long. And though Mark stayed, I was worried about leaving him with his family, but hey, I had no choice. At that time, he needed to be with them. It turned out that it's been a terrible idea. I'm not sure about what happened exactly after I left, but what I do know is that Mark sounded awfully cold towards me when he called me later. He told me to come over to his parents' house in the evening for the reading of his father's will. Again, I found myself in quite a bind as I had to arrange for another babysitter for the evening. The one that I requested earlier in the day proved to be careless, and her negligence resulted in Aiden falling from the sofa and getting this giant bump on his forehead. When I arrived at my in-laws, I was surprised to find them waiting for me. I apologized for being late, but it was met with apparent disdain upon their face. Mark looked ashamed, which made me feel terrible. To my horror, William has disowned Mark because of me. In his will, he stated that Mark has proven to be an irresponsible man because of a woman, and such a person was not worthy of inheriting anything from William's lifelong hard work. I'll be honest, I haven't been expecting that, but one look at Mark's face, I knew that he seemed cold because he'd already known. Once the will was read and Martha had cried all her tears, she told me to leave. I was too shocked and had no strength in my limbs. Taking it as a sign of stubbornness, Martha went on and on about how I was the one to put cracks between her children and their father. She held me responsible for Raina's unhappiness and Mark's. Before I left, she said something which I'll never forget. She told me that my days as her daughter-in-law were numbered because her son deserves somebody better than me. Ever since that day, I feel different. Detached from everything, it's as if I've lost my will to live. And no matter how hard I try it, I can't forget those words. Maybe, my heart tells me, it is my fault for acting stubborn when I could have easily given Mia to Raina and my baby girl would have enjoyed far more privileges than I've ever been able to provide. Right now, Mark's absence is something else that bothers me. He hasn't been home for a couple of days now, and I called his parents, but nobody picked up my phone. It's as if they've already discarded me. I've thought about loading the kids in the car and going to look for my husband, but I don't trust myself to handle all three of them by myself and in public. I'd end up making a fool of myself and proving the others right. Please, I request an amazing audience. Please help me. What should I do? Update number 4. No title. Hey everyone. It's finally nice to see that most of you are on my side. I much appreciate your condolences on Will's passing and your support through your words in the comment section. Once again, I have much to tell. I'll begin by thanking one particular fellow here who's encouraged me to hire a babysitter for a couple of hours, if not for the whole day. It's taken effort and time on my part, but I finally found myself a girl who adores my children and takes care of them well. Sometimes she stays over outside her working hours just to help me. The first thing that I did after entrusting the babysitter with my children was to look for Mark. By then, it had been nearly 5 days and he never came home. I started by visiting Martha and was surprised to find her neighbors on her doorstep. The moment old Claire Clemens saw me, she twisted her lips in disgust and marched away. Well, I had not been anticipating any warm welcome, but still, I wondered how much poison Martha had filled in everyone's eyes. So I asked Martha about Mark, and you know what she does? She laughs. She told me that I was proving her suspicions right, and I wasn't a mother material kind of woman. Even though I was angry at those words, I didn't say anything, because my concern right after then, it was Mark. Well, from the way she'd been talking, it didn't take long for me to guess that she had no idea about it either. For 2 hours, I went to every place that I've built memories with Mark and finally found him at last, by the beach and under a rock, outcropping what we called our spot. Finding him there looking haggard made my heart twist painfully in my chest. It was my fault, I kept thinking as I walked up to him. When he said nothing, I sat down beside him and together we watched the sunset. That's when he told me the truth of what had actually happened. Martha had been the one behind Will changing. Martha had been the one to change the will. Will had been sick for a long time, and during his last days she'd forced him to amend his first will. Then he told me how Martha said if he was to leave me and take the kids, then she'd give him her share from the will, and I swear I'd held my breath as I'd listened to him talk. For a split second, my suspicions thought was that he was going to leave me. But Mark proved, once again, that I was the greatest love of his life, like he was mine. Together, the two of us headed back home. The reason why I'm even here today is because I happened to overhear Mark's call with his mom. He was in the shower, so, well, he turned on the speaker. I couldn't believe that Martha was still trying to steer her son away from me. She'd kept telling him over and over and over that Mark deserved something better than an egotistical woman. She told him that I'd be the death of his children, as I could not look after them as a mother should. My only hope was in Mark's unwavering silence during the entire call, just listening. Once again, this shameless woman shamelessly requested your advice. How can I help Mark? For some reason, I feel like I'd end up losing him and the kids for being irresponsible and a covetous woman. Am I wrong? Update number 5. This is the final post by OP. Dear audience, I'm back, again, but this time with my final post. In the month I was away from here, I faced many life-altering situations. But Raina kidnapping my daughter tops everything. I'd noticed that after the funeral, when nothing worked in their favor, Martha still called Mark sometimes. When Mark refused to pick up his mother's call, and I refused to let her into my house, she did something none of us had thought of. She gave Raina permission to sneak into my house and take Mia away. After putting the kids to sleep, Mark and I had planned a candlelit dinner right there at our house. We were talking and laughing when I heard someone sneak in through the back window. I rushed for the bedroom where my kids were sleeping, and, well, Mark had taken off after the suspect. To my horror, I found Mia missing. The only thing that I could recall after that is my screams, and I'd shouted and I'd cried loud enough to gather the neighborhood. Aiden and Alicia cried at the top of their lungs, but all I could notice was Mia gone. I had countless people's scenarios running through my mind, each worse than before, but thankfully, an old couple in my neighborhood stayed to console me and help look after Aiden and Alicia. Those were the most agonizing 2 hours of my life. When Mark brought me up, I held her close, and together with Mark, I'd sunk to the floor as others congratulated us. Upon police investigation, the quote kidnapper gave away the information of the person who hired him. Raina. It would not be fair to say that I was baffled at the revelation because I wasn't. And I'd already expected Raina to stoop so low. After learning that from the police officer, I had not stopped. With Mark right behind me, I found myself at Martha's doorstep. That was the moment when I'd stopped holding anything back and accused them of all the hurt and disappointment they've caused over time, taking advantage of the opportunity. And I reminded Martha and Raina both that such behavior from them was part of the reason that I had not agreed to give Mia up. Under no circumstances, I'd wanted my daughter to end up like Raina. Even though Martha stood there quiet, Raina wasn't. She blamed me for pushing her buttons and making her take drastic measures. She said that no matter how hard I'd try, I'd never be able to give my daughter the kind of life she actually deserves. So, here's how things stand now. We're living cautiously, and every time I go out, I make sure to check for anyone suspicious over my shoulder. Even though the law let Raina off the hook with just probation, I won't put it past her to come after me once again. My children, well, they're growing up well, and I still struggle with them most of the time, but at least I know they're right in front of me and safe. I sincerely thank the mothers who've shared their experiences with their babies. I've read through most of the comments and would be reading the rest soon. Thank you so much for being with me my entire journey. Well, at the end of the story, OP is safe, the kids are safe, but OP's saying how, well, the looking over the shoulder is never going to stop. So guys, that leaves me with one question. If you were in OP's position and you knew your day-to-day life was in danger, how would you go about it? How would you cope? What would you do? Drop your comments in the comment section. Let's discuss this. If you guys are new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito. I post stories every single day. Stories that include Am I the A-hole dramas, inheritance dramas, Karen in the Wild dramas, all sorts of things. If that sounds like something that interests you, make sure you subscribe. Guys, have a fantastic day and I'll see you in the comment section.